we gotta pump the brakes a little bit on this move, and we gotta put a little bit. We gotta do the Rodney Dangerfield right now. Anthony Davis is Rodney Dangerfield. Nobody is giving Anthony Davis respect, and again, this trade is like Luka focused. Luka is the headline of the deal. He's going to the Lakers. He's the young star. He's the potential. He's one of the guys in the mix to be the upcoming face of the league at some, if his talent continues to progresses, depending on how his career unfolds. Like, he has that talent and he has that an ability to be the best basketball player in the league and to potentially be the guy that, is the dominant force. Chat. Like, make no mistake, we've said these things about him at some point in his career. So, like, again, it's hard to pause to look at a guy that you go once you labeled him generational at one point, and he still has shown the talent to be generational. Like, why would you give up on this guy right before he's about to enter the peak of his powers? But Davis is one of the 12, easily 12 best players. And I know you're going to, say Doncic is like the second best player in the league or whatever, but I think where Doncic is at in the player rankings is, maybe it just can correlate a little bit differently at times to the tier of guys where it's like, again, if we have to rank these guys based on, their individual skill set and how they're able to produce and the numbers that they have and how their team, like, if you are stacking all these factors up together and making a list, like, you're going to rank them in a certain way. But again, like, if we're at the pickup court, whatever and I get that's even a different scenario, but just like if we're in the NBA version of that and we're trying to assemble a title team and we have all the guys lined up, we need to start drafting guys, like, the case opens up a little bit differently at that point. And again, Doncic is a generational talent, but if you are looking at guys like right now, going forward, if you're saying I need to win a title this season, and if you're even like factoring in, of course, the next couple of seasons in it, as you absolutely should, the longevity of, that's all part of the value of, and you don't want to say asset as well too, and just, these guys as commodities. Like, one of the things about the player empower movement was viewing, getting away from that, but just the value of trading for a player and for a contract and the money that you're going to give him. Like, obviously longevity is a part of that, but if we're just trying to assemble title teams, like right now, you're still taking Jokic over him. You're still, to me personally, again, I know it seems like a hot take for some people right now, but I'm still taking Giannis over Doncic. Just hit the physical, overpowering ability and the two-way ability as well to the defensive ability. Like, the way he's able to overpower guys offensively puts him in a similar realm. They're both 30-point-a-game scorers. Like, you can literally just look at the numbers, and Giannis gives you the two-way thing. And to be honest, like, the defensive thing, I think, is a factor in this, because there was a report as well, amongst all the reports in this, that they had their eyes on Anthony Davis as kind of the one guy that they were really, really targeting. If, their wish list, I guess, of people that they could trade for, if they could trade away Luka, like, Anthony Davis was the number one guy on that list. And you look at the type of player that Davis is compared to Luka, like, it's an interesting dynamic. But again, like, to me, I'm still taking Jokic and Giannis. And at this, like, with the way SGA has just continued to evolve as a player, again, I think I would take SGA at this point. I was saying that last year. I was leaning SGA. It was a close conversation. And, we've had conversations about Tatum versus Luka as well too, and because of the defense with Luka, or because of the defense with Tatum, and Tatum has had continued to develop as a playmaker as well too in his career. Like, Jokic and Giannis are obviously a little bit more established in their careers, so it's like totally fair to say that, yeah, of course, those guys, over Giannis, okay, whatever. Shea and Tatum a little more in Luka's age range, but. And, even it's not like I'm just sitting here definitively like, yeah, Tatum over Luka. But it's like, yeah, I'm definitely like maybe leaning Tatum, and it's a close case either way. Like, to me, it's not definitive on whether or not you could, would you rather build a title team versus Tatum or Luka? Like, we've literally seen Tatum now win a title. And I get Luka was literally in the finals last year, which is another reason that this is tough, chat. But again, I think that's a close, like, it's not a wash with these conversations anyways. These are guys that are all in the mix, and we've seen that next young tier as well too, like, continue to step up and progress forward, because like we've talked about in the past, like, and like we were saying with Doncic right now at this point of his career getting traded, like that Doncic, SGA, Tatum tier of guys, like those guys are entering now the peak of their powers. Jokic and Giannis are kind of, those are in their 30s, kind of in that, still at their peak, but it's like, okay, we started to be a little more appreciative of the years that they're starting to give us anyways. And now the next tier of guys, you can really start to see that to form, but you can start to see them form as well too as immediate competitors. So guys like Wemby, guys like Edwards, and to be honest, he's hurt right now too, as well as Luka. So I don't know if you can necessarily say that health is a case for this guy over Luka. But with what we saw from Paolo this year, like, Paolo to me is now in the mix as, like, it's a conversation of who would you rather have. And again, like, Luka's pedigree at this, he's had more years. Like, Luka's literally been in the finals. Like, I don't, can't can't just literally write that off, chat. But again, to me, that is, that's 7 guys now that are in the mix, again, with a couple of them, Jokic or whatever, Wemby with the long-term factor, Jokic with the immediate factor, with like a couple of guys being definitive maybe knows over Doncic. Like, to me, there's an argument of like 7 or 8 guys of, would you rather, that's the mix of guys for the A+ tier guys that you can build a title around. And Davis is literally like the next guy right outside that tier. Like, again, I was saying like Davis would be like a top 12 guy, at worst in the league. And if we were just being pessimistic on this version of the sort of, who do you want to build a team around rankings, like, you could put Doncic 8th on this ranking. And, obviously that's an insane version of a rank. You look at a list and go, why would you have Doncic at 8th? I'm just saying, like, there's cases to be made with each of these guys. And all of a sudden the version of him and Davis is now a lot closer. So to me, this is just, not a definitive, they're just giving up, a second, third best player in the league for a guy that is just a guy that's clearly a step down. Like, obviously, again, with the long-term stuff and the age things, like, I get there's things to, there's things to look at for sure, and there's cases to be made both ways. But just if you were comparing this trades to other trades that have been made, just a trade that was made this offseason, like, in the moment, I feel better about I feel this trade is more equal than like the Towns Randall trade for Minnesota, New York. And, maybe, I don't know, do we check the tapes and prove me wrong, chat? But I'm just, you would think that, like, you're like, man, Randall and Edwards, it's just like, and with respect to Randall as a player as well, too, like, it just feels like that is kind of a weird fit for both those guys, especially with Gobert being kind of the third guy in the mix. And McDaniels, we saw him be a 40% shooter in the playoffs, but is he more a little bit of a step down than that? And maybe he can elevate at certain times. Like, I don't know. This is, like I just laid out, I think that this is a more even trade than that trade. And we've seen even now Towns be unlocked. And like we were just saying, Basketball Reference had him 4th in MVP odds now. Like, that trade even looks worse retrospectively. The Kawhi DeMar DeRozan trade, like, this trade to me is very similar to that type of trade. And I feel better about this trade for the Mavs than I do. And man, it's easier not being a Mavs fan, but as I do, for DeMar versus Kawhi. Because, again, the difference is with Davis, there is still, I think, a case that you can definitely build a title team around this guy. And he's been a part of a finals winning team. Like, you could say, yeah, Doncic has been the best player on a finals team, but Davis was arguably the finals MVP on that team as well. And, the bubble, they were able to get the Heat there in the couple games at the end as well. And they should have gotten that game. They were that series. They were the better team in that series. But you couldn't, even if Davis was the best player in that series, it's like if your second best player in that series is LeBron James, it's kind of the, the biggest second best player asterisk of all time in terms of how can Davis fare on his own as a lead guy. But again, he's only a couple of guys right behind, behind Doncic in any type of hypothetical play ranking, if you want to be, pessimistic, optimistic, even if you're working those things in there. Like, to me, it's hard to look at it and go that this trade is just a wash both ways. I was thinking even like the Paul George versus Oladipo trade, just in the moment. And that's a version too where you could be optimistic. What did the Cavs have? 91.5. Oh boy, Davis, this trade better be good. This trade better be good. They're going to be giving up 180 points in this game, chat. This is nuts. They might actually get 200 in a regular season game. What a way to follow up this trade. I'm watching this game like it literally doesn't even matter the 2% optimism that I have that this could work out because we're watching it right now. Like, this is just immediate bad luck. It's immediate bad omens, bad just I get Kyrie's not playing. Guys are out. But, no Washington, no Gafford, none of that stuff, chat. But it's just tough vibes to put out there day one in the post-Doncic era. But, again, like, I don't know if you can call this a bad trade. It's a tough trade because it's definitely a gamble. Like, make no mistake with, again, the injury history and the age and stuff like that. But, the Mavs, we have to, like, 10% trust what they're seeing with Doncic as well in the day-to-day and in the conditioning and in the, just the getting ready and being the lead and being the face of the franchise and being all that stuff. And, in the case of him going to LA as well too, like, it's a tough trade because of the situation that he is being brought into. Like, if you're just looking at Anthony Davis blindly and just going, okay, yeah, we're getting Davis for Luka in a swap and we're just bringing in the guy that we want, which, kind of at the end of the day, like, you have to do as a team, even if it's not a version of the trade that, again, we would have ideally wished for Luka Doncic or whatever, which, we'll go through that in a second as well too. But, what was I saying there, Chad? I just lost my train of thought on that. Oh, well, it doesn't matter. The fact that you're trading him into a situation that could potentially be really beneficial for the weaknesses that you're sending him out for is also like a really big, tough part of this pause. Because a couple of the points that, I heard made in the reaction to this that, are really good, that would really be a reason to why this would work out, outside of the fact that they're just, bringing in Luka Doncic as whatever, but just, the extra couple of 2% pieces as well was, and Simmons made this point with Russillo and Rob Mahoney, and their reaction to it was, obviously the revenge factor that he's going to have, just that chip on the shoulder. It's like, wait, why would this team feel the need to trade me? And even if they have legitimate reasons, like, it's still like, oh man, there's a thing that they were seeing, like, even if I thought I was still doing enough to keep me at the, like, and Russillo was saying this as well too, like, maybe Luka Doncic is looking, like, Russillo was saying this for the team standpoint, like, the team could look at it and go, it doesn't matter if Luka is, not taking it seriously, not staying in shape or whatever, because he's still able to play at this kind of level. But, like, Luka could look at that the same way and go, I'm still doing enough to keep me at this level. So if he has a chip on his shoulder where it's like, okay, now he has to really get into shape, then that's going to be really lethal as well. But you think about the potential teammate that he's going to have in LeBron. I say potential just because, that's another storyline that's out there with this whole thing, is what's going to happen with LeBron James now that his Clutch Sports buddy is been traded. Now that, Anthony Davis is gone, the Clutch Sports powers that dissolved from Los Angeles, who knows, like, what's going to happen with LeBron. But if he's there for this year and the next year or whatever, just like the time that Luka is going to be able to spend with LeBron and be able to see, and Wilbon made this point on SportsCenter on ESPN when I was watching, which shout out to Wilbon. It looked like he'd literally been up all night just covering and reading about this trade. And, like I said, I reacted to this trade when I woke up this morning. So it was great, roll out of bed and you're like, oh man, Luka's up. But Wilbon, poor guy's just on the phones, just grueling through the night, and it's just got to do a random like 9 a.m. SportsCenter hit talking about, half asleep, like, oh yeah, I think Luka Doncic is gonna be great. And whoa, sorry, SportsCenter host, but he did slip a good point in there where he where he was like, look, I mean, if you're talking about a guy that is having problems with conditioning and with staying in shape, like, literally the best role model and best person for him to view and to learn from and to see day to day is LeBron James. So, brutal situation to move him into if you're the Mavs. But again, you're bringing in Anthony Davis the other way, which we just need to give him a little bit of respect for the player that he is, even still at this point in the league, and still a guy that you can have, a really high level team around. And I know it's been a while since the Pelican days as well too. Like, this LeBron Davis run has been, a couple seasons now. The league has shifted over. We have a totally new CBA and, Prime, and all these new things are going to be in the mix. Like, we almost lost inside the NBA on TNT. Like, things are going to be way different now that, through this LeBron versus Anthony Davis tenure. But I do think that the Mavs team that he is going into is a little bit better than maybe some of the Pelicans teams that he played with. I guess, still like the peak versions of maybe the Sam would say like the DeMarcus Cousins, Drew Holiday, Rondo. That one just half a season peak versions Pelicans team, is that still like the best version of a Anthony Davis led team that we never saw? But and also in the response to the trade as well too. Again, they really did have their sights on Anthony Davis, and it really did seem like, like the reports were saying that was their one guy, and there was a lot of conversation about, whether or not you would shop a guy like, or not whether you would shop a guy like Luka Doncic, but if you would shop a guy like Luka Doncic, like what type of offer would you get for him? What type of package could you get? How many picks? Like all that stuff. And I think, the different types of offers that you could have gotten for Luka would have been very interesting to go see. Like obviously, I'm sure there's some very interesting things that you could have acquired from these other teams. But what I do think is kind of being lost in this trade from the Dallas side as well too. And again, not to say that this is not a Dallas won the trade sort of thinking thing. This is just like just trying to think about it positively from the Dallas side, because again, you see like the Dallas fans just feel crushed right now. It's like, come on guys, you're getting Anthony Davis. Like this is not the worst deal in the world. Like going back to the DeMar thing, like there is still that DeMar DeRozan thing. There is still that question of, I think you could build a title team around Anthony Davis. I think if you have the other pieces around him, it's a little it's close, Chad. It's close. Like we're saying, he's right on that level of like the most overqualified number 2 of all time versus just that last 1% that you need to just be that best guy on a final team and be that top guy. And it's the different. He's like the Jaylen Brown almost from last year, where it's like Jaylen Brown was awesome and the best player on the court for the majority of that Celtics series, but he's also able to do what he's able to do because of how Tatum is controlling the offense and sucking up just so much of the defense's attention. Like it's opening up the ability for Jaylen Brown to be able to work on these guys one-on-one. Pause again, but just the ability to have more of these favorable matchups and more space to be able to get into his isolation game, which is really where he strives as a player. But Davis is even like a step up from Brown. Like Brown is a type of guy where like, he's probably best suited as that type of player, whereas Davis is at least in this area. Like you bring in DeMar for Kawhi, and that was the problem with me with that trade. It's like, okay, we know what shout out to DeMar DeRozan. Like love to see it. The Not Like Us music video is great and all that stuff. The pop out, like shout out. But in terms of trying to win a title with him as a player and just that mental confidence as a fan, it's just that's a major step down from Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard was the Finals MVP at that point. And after that trade as well too, again, that's another retrospective trade where hindsight with that Cat Randall trade is going to continue to look more brutal every day. Hindsight from that Kawhi DeMar trade was you had to trade Kawhi because he was actually asking out. Like Luka wasn't even asking out here, but Kawhi goes on to win a title with the Raptors as well too. So Kawhi. I guess that's the other version of it. Like, is Luka going to win a title with the Lakers? Is that what we're saying here? But, Kawhi had already won a title and was playing at that level and was unlocking his offensive game and just was continuing to do that. in Toronto as well too. Whereas DeMar, you're like, okay, he's great. He's third team All NBA. He can give you 25 a game. Oh, wait a second. He can even shift his game a little bit to be a little more playmaker-y. And was he like 20 and 8 there for a 7? Maybe like 20 and 6. 6 a game-ish or whatever. But he was really, really a fun player to cheer for and a great player and clutch as well too. Like DeMar DeRozan in a big moment was reliable. That was fun about him. Some of the playoff stuff was, maybe a little sketchy. But in the regular season, you could count on the man to get you 2 points in the fourth quarter. And he was very, very big at pause in some clutch moments. But at least with Davis, you're like, yeah, we can still potentially build for the next couple of seasons a title contending team around this type of guys. So if you also, look at the type of team that Dallas has, like, yeah, Luka is just going to make any team that he goes to better because he's Luka Doncic. But, and, if losing Luka Doncic, like, that's just going to be a brutal, brutal loss for your backcourt. But, I mean, that is what the Dallas Mavericks are. Like, the Mavericks are a team of swings and ball handlers and these kind of, like, one-on-one, need-a-look creator guys for themselves. And, obviously maybe the smart move would not be to move Luka out of that to, maybe break up a guy and free up some minutes. But again, you're not necessarily bringing in another redundant player for that, which I think is important to look at as well. It's like, okay, maybe the Mavs were at least putting a little, like, there was at least 2% thought into the player that they were going to acquire. Because, again, looking at that thought of what if the Mavs had shopped Luka Doncic and what could they have gotten for Luka Doncic? Well, I did go to the trade machine real quick and was like, let's just run through these teams, run through these teams real fast and see, like, what is on the potential market for Doncic? Like, is there this crazy move that would have fit their wish list for flipping this star player and for turning this team around? And there is, a bunch of teams that you could kind of look at and go, okay, they could maybe get like a bunch of, like we're saying, a picks package. There's some salaries and all this stuff that's going to be involved. Like the Bridges trade was being YouTube, don't cut us for that. That was just us saying half of contract. That's all it was. We're not saying British swear words over here. YouTube, the AI bots are going to be like, what did he just say? And they're going to take this stream down. But I don't know. I mean, people have said some pretty aggressive stuff on a YouTube live stream. I feel like they really only care if you start playing music and you're going to make money where UMG could be making money instead. But, yeah, like where you could get the contracts and stuff. But the Bridges trade was being brought up in this. And his trade is interesting to look at because, yes, it is a ton of picks. But picks are mostly what Brooklyn got back in that deal. Like the contracts that in the players that Brooklyn got back were mostly just that. They were just the contracts. Like Bogdanovich, I think was... Here, let's actually pull that Bridges deal back up. Oh, again, basketball reference. Is it working now? Were we on timeout for a second? What was going on? It's got to let us in now. There's no way. Is our Wi-Fi down? Oh, man, we must be having Wi-Fi connectivity issues. What happens if we just... I was going to say, what happens if we go in through the back door, but pause. What happens if we just go in through Google? Will it change? Can we cheat the system? Can we trick it into making it work? I don't think so. We're going to have to reset the computer, unfortunately, and we're not going to be able to do that right now because we're on a live stream. But let's see if we can second screen pull this up real quick. I guess that's where it's going to be tough, chat, is the visual component. You're just going to have to take our word for it. You're just going to have to believe what we're reading is true. Ooh, man, and I guess we'll have to do the best we can. But I guess we're just looking for the contracts here. Like we said, they traded a ton of picks in that deal, like 5, 6, 7 picks or whatever. But the players that they traded back for Bridges were Bogdanovich, Diakite, and Shake Milton. So Shake Milton's like, Diakite and Shake Milton aren't even there. And Bogdanovich, again, like solid player, but that's just not a guy that I think you're really like considering. That's this not a we're not dropping a diss track here on Bogdanovich, but that's not a guy you're considering like a piece in that kind of deal just because of where Brooklyn's going forward as a franchise. Like, yeah, maybe you consider him a piece because you could trade him off for something, but it's just it's just like a little bit of a different type of thing. So, like, could Davis get you 4 first-round picks right now or in the offseason? Like, probably. So it's still like you're still getting similar value for now. The Bridges to Doncic value is tough too because it's like Doncic is first team all NBA. Bridges is not at that level, so Doncic can give you that type of thing. But Davis on the other hand as well too is a first team all NBA level talent when he's at the peak of his powers. But again, like Brooklyn would be a perfect example. Like, yeah, I guess you could figure out the Brooklyn trade. Like, it is a ton of picks and, there's some good players there, Cam Johnson, but that's just, that's a hodgepodge deal of what if. Same with the Wizards. Like, that's a lot of what if right there. You're not going to shop Doncic to the Wizards. The Blazers could, Advia, if you're going to start really scooping up contracts here. Like, what do we want? Scoot? We want Shaedon Sharpe. Like, we're just going to go, shop all the Blazers assets. Same with the Jazz. Same with the Raptors. Like, none of these teams you're going to really shop them to. Chicago as well. Like, Levine and some picks. You want to do Kobe White and Vooch and Pat Williams and some stuff. Like, I mean, these are assets, people. I'm not saying that these are bad players and bad pieces and things that you don't want. Kobe White's a nice player. I'm just saying, like, what are we sitting down here to figure out? Like, okay, how much work we trying to do as a GM? We trying to really narrow down this Scotty Barnes, RJ Barrett for Luka Doncic trade. Like, again, the Mavs are a win now team, and that's important to think with this trade. So that is, I think, on one hand, you're going, okay, that's short-sighted for Luka Doncic. Are you narrowing your market for him, like cutting out, these teams that do have some of these picks? Like, maybe, yeah, you get 7 first-round picks. It's a lot of what if, but it's still a different version of it, and maybe you like it better if you're trying to do a full reset. But, it's like, okay, I'm fine if they're bypassing those teams. That's okay. I don't know if there's a lot of work there to be done with figuring out a trade. And there's even some teams as well, too, where, again, like you could figure out the package and you could get pause and you could get some guys to go back and to get some pieces that you really feel good about and to get the whole collection, because that's the thing. It's like people are just upset that they didn't get the collection of picks and the collection of players. But it's like, what are you getting back at the end of the day? Are you getting actually picks that you're going to use and you're going to be valuable and you're going to turn into a good player and, guys that are actually going to become something for the team? Or are you just getting a lot of, again, maybe stuff that might be like Golden State, you going to trade Doncic to Golden State? That's interesting. Is it Wiggins? Is it Kuminga? You want to throw Pods in there as well? That's a lot of pieces going back, and maybe even I think there might even have to be like one more contract in there with like Hield or Kyle Anderson or Gary Payton, take your pick of one of those guys. But that's a couple of interesting pieces, but that just sets your franchise in a different direction where you're going, okay, we're a young team now with Kuminga, with Podziemski, with Wiggins, who's still a nice role player. We've got the picks going forward. Like, being a young team is not bad, but they can't, with the guys right now, fully commit to being a young team unless, of course, they're going to go full, trade Kyrie, which, again, you could do, and then trade PJ Washington and trade everything. But I think the point of this was to try to actually, I think the Mavs are still actually, like, trying to win the title. And it maybe does seem like a bad version of that gamble. But, again, and, maybe just the thought is, Luka just shouldn't be on the trade market as well, too. Like, I get that. I'm just more willing to view Anthony Davis as a guy that is a worthy guy to take a shot at.